Hi there! Continuing with our review of the Spanish alphabet, today we will see the letter B, or letra B. La letra B, the letter B. The letter B in Spanish has just one sound, one pronunciation, the B, right? In Spanish we have the B and the V, the same as in English. Here we will see some masculine given names, feminine given names, some names of fruits and eatables, animals that begin with letter B, some adjectives, some adverbs that begin with B, some false friend words or false cognates, and some regular verbs and irregular verbs that begin with the letter B. And in our next class I will show you how to conjugate the irregular verb that we will see today. I won't show you how to conjugate the regular verbs because I have dedicated quite some few lessons to show you how to conjugate all the groups of verbs into all the Spanish verbal tenses. That's about 22 verbal conjugations, okay, or tenses. So let's begin with the male or masculine given names. Nombres propios masculinos. Nombres propios masculinos. We have Bruno, Bruno, Bernardo, Bernardo, and Benito, Benito. These are three Spanish given names that begin with B, and these are male or masculine names. Of these three, Bruno and Bernardo are the most common ones, right? Let's see the feminine given names. Nombres propios femeninos. Nombres propios femeninos. We have Beatriz, Beatriz, like the beloved one of the Dante Alighieri, right? And we have Blanca, Blanca, and Beatriz. Both are quite common, okay? So these two names are very frequently seen. As for animals that begin with letter B, we have búfalo, búfalo, okay, the buffalo. We have ballena, ballena, ballena. This is a whale, the whale, right? And we have búho, búho. Búho is owl, the bird, okay? As for fruits and eatables, I could just come up with banana right now. I'm sure there are some more, but I just remembered the word banana, okay? Banana, which obviously means banana, right? We have adjectives that begin with letter B. For example, bueno, bonito, barato. Bueno, bonito, barato. And why did I choose these three adjectives? Because these are the famous three B's in Spanish, okay? When we want to buy something or when we are looking for something to buy, we are looking for the three B's, right? Bueno, bonito, y barato. Bueno means good, bonito means pretty, barato means cheap, right? So when there's a hawker in the street selling his goods in the market or in any corner, he's actually promoting his goods, saying that they are bueno, bonito, and barato. Okay, the three B's in Spanish are very famous. Okay, so remember, bueno, bonito, barato, good, pretty, and cheap. We have adverbs that begin with letter B. I just came up with bastante. Bastante means quite, okay? Or also, we can use, if we put add an S at the end, it means several, okay? But just like this, bastante means quite. It's used the same as the word quite in English. False friends or false cognates that begin with letter B. And we have some few. For example, my favorite false friend is billón. Billón. Why? Billón, it looks as if it meant billion, right? However, the word billón in Spanish means trillion in English, right? There's a difference of 3 zeros between the word billón and the word billion, right? So, un billón is this. Look how many zeros. Right? So this is un billón in Spanish. It's the same as 1 trillion in English. This in Spanish is mil millones, or literally means 1,000 million. In English this is called 1 billion, okay? Okay. Our other false friend with B is the word boda. Boda means wedding, okay? It looks as if it meant body, however it means wedding. The Spanish word for body is cuerpo. Cuerpo, okay? Now let's go to the verbs. We have regular verbs that begin with letter B. I should have written this in Spanish. Verbos regulares. Remember that in Spanish, all adjectives change their ending to plural or feminine or masculine, to plural or singular or masculine or feminine, depending on the noun, okay? So, verbos is a noun that is masculine and it is in plural. So, regulares is also an adjective that is in plural. In this case, this adjective has no masculine and feminine, okay? Why? Because it's an adjective that does not end in O nor in A, right? The singular of the verb of the adjective regular is like this, regular. It doesn't end with O or A, so it doesn't change to masculine or feminine, okay? Okay. So our regular verbs that begin with letter B are blanquear, blanquear. Blanquear means to whiten, okay? When we will whiten our clothes that are dirty, we say blanquear. Or we will whiten a wall, we say blanquear, okay? Blanquear. Also, when we are talking about accounts, right? We talk about blanquear la cuenta, to whiten an account, okay? That's more used when talking about washing money and all that. Okay, our other verb is barrer, barrer. And here you have to pronounce the rough R, rrr, okay? Barrer, barrer. The verb barrer means to broom, right? To broom. You have a broom and you're brooming the floor, okay? Barrer. Also, we use barrer when, for example, we will broom something with our sight. In English that is not used, but in Spanish we do use the verb barrer to say that we give a thorough glance or look all along an area, right? Okay. We have the verb borrar, borrar, which means to erase or to delete. Borrar, also with the r, with the r. Okay, so we use borrar when we write down something and we want to erase it. Okay, we also use borrar when we want to delete a file. That is also borrar. Okay, and we have the verb bajar, bajar. Remember that letter J in Spanish is pronounced like a very rough H in English, okay? Right? So the regular verb bajar means to go down or to put something down, okay? For example, if I will say, I'm going down, voy a bajar. I'm going downstairs, voy a bajar, right? I will go down the mountain, voy a bajar la montaña. I will climb down, voy a bajar also, okay? Also, to put down, right? I will put down the pen, voy a bajar la lapicera, okay? So, the verb bajar means to go down or to put down. So it is quite a useful verb. So all these verbs, you really do not need to memorize right now the conjugation, because I gave you the rules for conjugating all the verbs in Spanish, all the regular verbs in Spanish into all the different tenses, okay? So remember that we have in Spanish 3 groups of verbs: those that end in AR, those that end in ER, and the verbs that end in IR, okay? So in some previous lessons I gave you rules for conjugating all of the regular verbs of each of those 3 groups, okay? So now let's see one irregular verb that begins with letter B. I just came up with the verb bendecir, that means to bless, right? So for example, the priest blesses the people. El padre or el sacerdote bendice a las personas, okay? Bendecir means to bless. And since Spanish is a very regular language, it's quite regular, so there are not so many irregular verbs as there are in English. Of course there are many irregular verbs, right? But for letter B, it was hard for me to come up with this one. Obviously there must be some more verbs, but I hardly came up with this verb, bendecir, okay? So in our next class I will show you how to conjugate the irregular verb bendecir, okay? So I hope this was useful, and I see you next class. This lesson we will dedicate to conjugate the irregular verb bendecir. That's a verb I promised in the last class that we would conjugate, okay? I believe I put too much information in this whiteboard, but at least in this lesson I want to make sure that I'll be giving you the conjugation for present, past, future, present continuous, and the imperatives, okay? So the verb bendecir, or to bless, is one of the few irregular verbs that begin with letter B, okay? Actually, it's the only one I can come up with right now. So the title is Conjugando el verbo irregular bendecir, right? Conjugating the irregular verb bendecir. Let's begin with the future tense, and remember this is an irregular verb, right? So although most of it you will see that the pattern for the regular verbs applies, in some tenses and some pronouns you will notice that it changes. For example, in the present tense, right? In the present or tiempo presente, we begin with yo bendigo, okay? Let's see, the root of the verb is, remember that the root is what remains after stripping out the termination, IR or ER or AR. In this case it is a verb that ends with IR, okay? So that's the group of the verb. You can see that we don't have the whole root of the verb, because the root of the verb is bendes up to the letter C, okay? And here we just have up to letter B, bend, okay? So you can see this is an irregular verb. Yo bendigo, tú bendices, él or ella bendice, nosotros bendecimos, vosotros bendecís, ustedes bendicen, ellos bendicen. For the past, it's also irregular. You can see that we do not have the full root of the verb, okay? Yo bendije, tú bendijiste, tú bendijiste, él bendijo, nosotros bendijimos, vosotros bendijisteis, ustedes bendijeron, and ellos bendijeron. Okay, this is the simple past, or in Spanish we also call it pretérito indefinido. Now let's see future, the Spanish simple future, right? Yo bendeciré. You can see that here we do have the full root of the verb, right? And actually in the simple future, the verb becomes regular, right? It conjugates as a regular verb of the group of verbs that end in IR, okay? And remember that I mentioned before that of the three groups of verbs we have in Spanish, the ones that end in ar, the ones that end in er, and the ones that end in ir, the third group, so the verbs that end in IR, like bendecir, that is the group that has more irregular verbs, okay? So, yo bendeciré, tú bendecirás, él bendecirá, nosotros bendeciremos, vosotros bendeciréis, ustedes bendecirán, and ellos bendecirán, right? For they will bless. I will bless, you will bless, he will bless, okay? We have the other kind of future, right? That is probably the easiest future to manage in Spanish for English speakers, right? This one would be similar to the English future I am going to, right? I am going to eat, I am going to sit down, I am going to bless, I am going to whatever, okay? But it's more frequently used in Spanish than the future I am going to is in English, okay? So it's quite enough if you learn if you can actually manage this future tense in Spanish, right? Yo voy a bendecir. Tú vas a bendecir. Él va a bendecir. Nosotros vamos a bendecir. Vosotros vais a bendecir. Ustedes van a bendecir, and ellos van a bendecir, for they are going to bless. Let's learn now the present continuous, right? Present continuous, in Spanish we call it gerundio. Gerundio, okay? So, remember in our previous, when we learned how to conjugate verbs that end in AR, I showed you that the gerundio, or the present continuous ending for the verb, adds ando, right? Same as in English, it adds ing, right? Blessing, when we create the present continuous. In Spanish, the verbs that end in ar and add at the end of the verb ando, right? A-N-D-O. But the verbs that end in er and ir, like bendecir, they add endo, right? E-N-D-O, right? Also, see how the auxiliary verb we use is the verb estar, right? So, Our present continuous for bendecir is yo estoy bendiciendo. Tú estás bendiciendo. Here I missed the auxiliary verb. Él está bendiciendo. Nosotros estamos bendiciendo. Vosotros estáis bendiciendo. Ustedes están bendiciendo. Ellos están bendiciendo. For they are blessing. Okay? Let's take a look at the imperative conjugation. Okay? Imperative, we have affirmative and negative. And we learn both imperative for affirmative and imperative for negative, because the second person of the singular and the second person of the plural, that is you and you, change the conjugation depending whether it is in the affirmative or in the future. Sorry, in the affirmative or in the negative. Here it is, look. Here and here. And here and here. Okay, you see how it is different. So in the affirmative, remember that we do not begin with the first person of the singular. We do not begin with the subject pronoun I or yo, because it makes no sense to give a command or to use the imperative form for I, right? So we begin with you, with the second person. Bendice tú. You bless, imperative, command, right? Bendiga él. Bendigamos nosotros. Bendecid vosotros. Take a look. Bendecid vosotros. And bendigan ellos. Now in the negative, we begin again with tú, with you, right? No bendigas. See how it changes. For the affirmative it is ben. So see how it changes for the negative. Bendigas. Because in the affirmative we say bendice. In the negative we say bendigas. Right? So, no bendigas. Do not bless. No bendigamos. Sorry. No bendiga él. Now it's the third person of the singular, he. No bendiga. Now for we. No bendigamos. No bendigamos. Let's not bless, right? No bendigamos. Now see how in the second person of the plural you, how it changes again compared to the affirmative. We say no bendigáis vosotros, right? Vosotros, you plural, no bendigáis. While in the affirmative we say bendecid, right? Bendecid and bendigáis. The first one is in the affirmative, the second one is in the negative. And for they, we say no bendigan, okay? No bendigan. So affirmative and negative, the imperative form is the same except for you singular and you plural, right? That is for tú and for vosotros. I wanted to tell you one more thing. Okay, this is bendecir belongs to the, of the three groups of verbs, the group of verbs that end in IR is the smaller of the groups, okay, the smallest. The biggest group is the group of verbs that end in AR, right, and it's the group that has more regulars and less irregular verbs. And this is the opposite with the group of verbs that end in IR, right? This is a smaller group and it has more irregular verbs than the other groups of verbs that end in ar and that end in er, okay? So here we have seen the conjugation of bendecir in present, past, these two futures, present continuous and imperative. And if this future tense is too complicated, or because you have to remember the unique conjugation for every single pronoun, right? And plus for every single verb, then remember that it's enough if you can manage this future tense conjugation in Spanish, okay? Then you just use this conjugation of the auxiliary verb, and then you just add the verb you want to conjugate in the infinitive, right? The same as you do in English with future tense. You use the verb to will, right, as auxiliary verb, and then you leave the verb in infinitive, right? I will eat, I will cut, I will talk. So I hope this class has been useful, so don't doubt in sending any questions or doubts you have, and I'll be pleased to answer or to give you some hints or help you, right? So I hope I see you next class. Hi there! In this lesson I will start teaching you some Spanish modal verbs, okay? So which are the modal verbs? The modal verbs are those verbs that we use together with another verb, okay? For example, I should go, I should eat, okay? The verb to should, the verb here should, or the verb to want, right? I want to go, I want to stay. Those verbs are modal verbs, and we use them together with another verb that they are relating to, okay? Here in Spanish we have these four modal verbs are the most used and common ones, okay? So we will start learning these four, okay? So we have the verb poder, which means to can or to be able to, but it also means to may, okay? Poder. So this Spanish verb has two meanings, to can, to may. The verb querer, okay, that means to want. In Spanish, the verb querer also has two meanings. It means to want, right? And there it is a modal verb, okay? For example, I want to go, okay? Or it also means to love something or somebody, okay? The verb deber. Deber means to should, or to must, okay? To must or to have to. Here we have two ways of saying to must or to have to. Deber, right, a modal verb, and tener que, which literally means the same thing as to have to, because the verb tener actually means to have, yes? And to have to, which means the same thing as to must, is the same in Spanish, tener que, okay? And our fourth and last modal verb will be soler, soler, which means to use to, okay? For example, I used to eat meat. I used to eat meat, right? Yo suelo comer carne. I used to get up early. Yo suelo levantarme temprano. Soler. So, our four verbs will be poder, querer, deber, and soler. Okay? You can see that these four verbs, they belong to the second group of Spanish verbs. The verbs that end with ER, okay? E-R. Right? I think this is just a coincidence. It doesn't mean anything. I didn't choose them because of this. Okay, now I want you to see this. This verb, this one, and this one are irregular verbs. And this one here is regular. So, poder is an irregular verb. Querer is an irregular verb. And soler is another irregular verb. And the verb deber, that means to must or to have to, is a regular verb, okay? So since these modal verbs are very important verbs in Spanish, in the next lessons I will show you how to conjugate them, right? Mainly because these three are irregular, okay? So you cannot actually use the rule for regular verbs to conjugate these three, okay? So now let's read some examples using sentences with these words, okay? So you can see how they work. For poder, right? We will see how the first example is poder as to may. Let's see. Puedo ir. Puedo ir means may I go or can I go, right? Second example, poder as to can or be able to. No lo puedo mover. No lo puedo mover means I cannot move it, right? This means word by word, not it, I can move, okay? Now, our third example, using the verb querer, that means to want. Quiero una taza de té. Quiero una taza de té means I want a cup of tea. Quiero ir contigo. Quiero ir contigo. I want to go with you. Look at the word contigo. Con means with. Okay? With you, to say with you, there is this word that means with you, contigo. Okay? It's just one word. Debemos quedarnos en casa. Debemos quedarnos en casa means we have to stay at home. See how the verb to stay is in Spanish what we call verbo reflexivo or reflexive verb. You see, quedarnos. This literally means to stay ourselves. Okay? I know this kind of verbs doesn't exist in English. That's why it sounds awkward, right? But in Spanish, these verbs are quite common. We have to stay ourselves at home. Quedar is stay. Nos would be ourselves. En casa. We have to stay at home, or we must stay at home. Él debería ir a trabajar. Él debería ir a trabajar means he should go to work, or he must go to work. Look at this. Debería. This ending, ia, you see, is typical of the conditional tense in Spanish. Okay, so this is the conditional tense of the verb deber, right? Él debería, he should, conditional. Now with our last verb, soler, or to use to. Let me take this out. Yo suelo levantarme temprano. Yo suelo levantarme temprano. This means I used to get up early. Temprano means early. This is another reflexive verb. Look at the ending, me. This literally means to get up myself, okay? Because actually, levantar, just this first part of the verb, levantar means to lift something, right? Levantar. But to get up, that is, the verb to get up is levantarse, which literally means to lift oneself, okay? Levantarse, which is to get up, literally means to lift oneself, okay? This is another of what we call a reflexive verb in Spanish, okay? So reflexive verbs, when we conjugate them, but this remains in infinitive, and here you see we change the ending, okay? So levantarme would be to lift myself, or to get up, okay, in English. So yo suelo levantarme temprano. I used to get up early. And our last example is ella suele hablar mucho. This is our last example with the verb soler. Ella suele hablar mucho. Ella suele hablar mucho. She uses to speak a lot. Okay? Mucho, a lot. Ella suele hablar mucho. She uses to speak a lot. So, then we have already seen some examples using these four most common Spanish modal verbs, okay? Poder, querer, deber, soler. Or to can or to may, to want, to must, and to use to. So in our next lessons, I will show you how to conjugate at least these three verbs that are irregular verbs, okay? And since these are very useful verbs and important verbs in Spanish, it's quite important that we learn how to conjugate these irregular verbs, okay? So I'm looking forward to see you in our next lesson, and remember, if you have any doubts or questions, you can send them to me through the YouTube channel or through the blog, right? And also, if you have any topic that you are interested in learning, you can also suggest that to me, and I'll try to show you, to teach that topic, okay? So, I'll see you next time. Hi again. In this class, as I mentioned, we will see how to conjugate the verb poder. The verb poder is one of the four most used Spanish modal verbs, okay? So the modal verbs are those verbs that we have to use together with another verb. For example, the verb to want. I want to eat. I want to go, right? So to want is a modal verb, and it is used with another verb, okay? So in the previous class we saw the four most used Spanish modal verbs, and poder was one of them. Poder means to can or to may, okay? And since poder is an irregular verb, we said that we will learn how to conjugate the verb poder, which is such an important verb in Spanish, okay? And so useful and necessary to build so many sentences in Spanish, okay? So we will see the simple present, simple past, this is what we call the present perfect, then the future, two different kinds of future, okay? And imperative. Imperative in the affirmative, imperative in the negative. Why? Because in Spanish, there are two different conjugations in the imperative, whether it's in the affirmative or the negative. there are two subject pronouns that change, okay? You singular and you plural, okay? You can see how there is a different conjugation for these, okay? It's the same subject or person, but one is in the affirmative, the other one is in the negative. So that's why we will see the imperative in these two, okay? So let's begin. Conjugación del verbo modal poder. Conjugación del verbo modal poder. Conjugation of the verb modal poder, or to can. Remember that in Spanish, we usually write first the noun and later comes the adjective, okay? In English it is the other way around. First the adjective, later the noun. In Spanish, first the noun, then the adjective. So, verb modal, okay? So, presente or tiempo presente, present tense. Yo puedo, tú puedes, él o ella puede, nosotros podemos, vosotros podéis, ustedes pueden, ellos pueden, they can. So here you can see these, you can see that are irregular. You can see how the irregularity becomes quite noticeable, okay? Why? Because the root of the verb changes. You can see that the root of a verb in Spanish is the beginning before the ending. The ending are these two last letters that determine what group the verb belongs to. In this case, it is a second group, the group of the verbs that end with er or er, right? And this pod is the root of the verb. A regular verb, when we conjugate it, no matter what tense it is, the root should always remain intact. Here, however, we see how the root has changed, okay? Instead of pod, it's the root changed to puede, okay? Puede. So this is what we call an irregularity in Spanish, okay? Let's see simple past or pasado simple, or in Spanish we also call it pretérito indefinido, okay? Yo pude, for I could. Tú pudiste, you could. Él or ella pudo, he or she could. Nosotros pudimos, we could. Vosotros pudisteis, you could, you plural, okay? Ustedes pudieron, also you could, you plural. Ustedes pudieron is how the way it's spoken in Latin America. And ellos pudieron, they could, okay? So this is the simple past. Here you can see also how the root of the verb poder has changed, okay? Instead of an O, like in the root, we have a U, pud, right? Pud, pud, pud. You see? It changed everywhere there, okay? Let's jump to the present continuous. In Spanish, we have two names for present continuous tense. We can call it participio presente, or also gerundio, okay? So, in the present continuous, we have an auxiliary verb and the verb we are conjugating. The verb in English would end in ing always, okay? In Spanish, depending on the group of the verb, or the group the verb belongs to, it will end in ando or yendo. The verbs that end in AR end with ando. And the verbs that end with ER or IR, they add the ending yendo, like here, yendo, okay? And also here you can see how the root of the verb poder has changed again, okay? You can see this is an irregular verb, right? So, our auxiliary verb for the present continuous is going to be the verb estar. Same as in English, we have the verb to be, right, as the auxiliary verb. I am eating. I am doing, right? So in Spanish, we just conjugate the auxiliary verb, and this remains the same, okay? Yo estoy pudiendo. I am being able to. Tú estás pudiendo. You are being able to. Él or ella está pudiendo. He or she is being able to. Nosotros estamos pudiendo. We are being able to. Vosotros estáis pudiendo. You, plural, are being able to. Ustedes están pudiendo. You, plural, are being able to. And ellos están pudiendo. They are being able to. Okay? So now let's jump into one of the types of future in Spanish, okay? This is the typical future tense in Spanish, without any auxiliary verb. Unlike English, where in English the future tense uses an auxiliary verb, I will go, or I am going to go, right? In Spanish, the typical future tense doesn't need an auxiliary verb, right? And therefore, there is a different conjugation for every single subject pronoun, right? And it can be a bit more difficult to remember or to memorize every single conjugation for every single verb in Spanish. That's why I also teach you this second type of future using an auxiliary verb that is more like the English future tense, okay? So let's begin with the first one. Yo podré means I will be able to. Yo podré. Tú. So we said yo podré means I will be able to, future tense. Tú podrás. You will be able to. Él or ella podrá. He or she will be able to. Nosotros podremos. We will be able to. Vosotros podréis. You, plural, will be able to. Ustedes podrán. You, plural, will be able to. And ellos podrán. They will be able to. So here you can see how there is no irregularity in the future tense, okay? So you can see how the root of the verb remains untouched. It remained identical as the root of the verb here in the infinitive, okay? So the verb poder in the future tense is regular, right? Same thing here. You can see that, well, here, actually, in this type of future, all the verbs are irregular, right? Because we just use the verb in infinitive. Here, infinitive, okay? What goes conjugated is only the auxiliary verb. That will always remain the same auxiliary verb for whatever verb we want to conjugate, okay? Same as in English with the verb to will. I will go. So let's see future number 2. Yo voy a poder. Yo voy a poder. I am going to be able to. Tú vas a poder. You are going to be able to. Él or ella va a poder. He or she is going to be able to. Nosotros vamos a poder. We are going to be able to. Vosotros vais a poder. You plural are going to be able to. Ustedes van a poder. You plural are going to be able to. And ellos van a poder. They are going to be able to. Okay? You can see here also there has been nothing awkward, nothing irregular, right? And we will finish with the imperative tense. Okay? Imperativo. Imperativo or modo imperativo. First we will see the affirmative. Afirmativo. Imperativo, afirmativo. Remember that in the imperative we never begin with the first subject pronoun, with I. We always begin with you, okay? We omit the I. Puede tú. This is a command, an order, okay? Because it's imperative tense. Puede tú. So we can also add, if we will, an exclamation mark, okay? We should open it here too, okay? Puede tú. Pueda él. Like, be able to, okay? Podamos nosotros. Poded vosotros. Puedan ustedes. Puedan ellos. Okay? Now let's see in the negative. Negativo. Negativo. In the negative. No puedas. Don't be able to. Okay? No puedas. No pueda él. Okay? No podamos nosotros. No podáis vosotros. No puedan ustedes. And no puedan ellos. Right? So you can see how these change in the affirmative and the negative. The second of the singular and second person in the plural, okay? So this is the you singular and the you plural. And the you plural, I mean using the vosotros, the conjugation that is used in Spain. If you use the ustedes that is used in Latin America, there will be no, it will remain the same actually. It's a bit easier, okay? So let's go again. We read one in the affirmative, the other one in the negative. One in the affirmative, the other in the negative, okay? Puede tú, no puedas. Pueda él, no pueda. Podamos nosotros, no podamos. Poded vosotros, no podáis. Puedan ustedes, no puedan. And puedan ellos, no puedan. Okay? So here we have seen the conjugation, at least the most used and common tenses in Spanish, okay, for the verb poder. If you want to see all the 22 different conjugation tenses in Spanish, you can go to my PowerPoint video lessons, right? The lessons from 130 to 150 101, no, or 152, I don't remember. So those lessons I have dedicated to show all the different Spanish tenses for the regular verbs, okay? For the regular verbs of the first group, of the second group, and of the third group, okay? But for these that are irregular verbs, instead of teaching how to conjugate the 22 different tenses, I will just show you the most important tenses in Spanish, the ones we use more, okay? Or at least some of the ones we use more, because here we have some that are missing, okay? For example, the present perfect. Oh, here I made a mistake. Look, sorry. Here. No, sorry, this is okay. This is participio presente. But at the beginning I told you that no, this is not participio presente. Sorry, this is the gerundio. I made a mistake. Participio presente is the present perfect, right? There I made a mistake at the beginning of the class. I got confused. This is gerundio, okay? So, participio presente, sorry, I think I got confused a bit. What we call the present perfect, that's it. The present perfect. That tense that is quite used, I haven't included it here, okay, because probably for a matter of space in the whiteboard. Probably we'll see it in a next class. However, it's quite simple because we just conjugate the auxiliary verb and then the verb that we are conjugated remains the same. For example, I have gone, I have eaten, right? In Spanish it's the same. Yo he ido, or in this case, yo he podido. Okay, so as you can see, we haven't conjugated all the different tenses in Spanish for this verb poder, okay? But here at least you have some of the most used and useful and frequent tenses in Spanish that you will be using and needing when speaking or writing, okay? So in the next class we will learn another of the modal verbs we saw in the last class, and okay, so we'll see the 3 irregular modal verbs that we learned. So I hope I see you next time. Goodbye. Hi guys. In this class we will see the verb querer. We will learn how to conjugate this modal verb, okay? So our title today is conjugación del verbo modal querer. Conjugación del verbo modal querer, or conjugation of the modal verb querer. That means to want, okay? So this is one of the 4 modal verbs that we learned, that we've seen in our class about modal verbs, okay? Spanish modal verbs. The modal verbs, we said, are those verbs that we use together with another verb, right? So to use a modal verb, we need another verb afterwards. For example, the modal verb to want. Yeah, the same one here, okay? I want to go. I want to eat, okay? So we use the verb to want together with another verb, okay? That is a modal verb. Or also the verb to must. I must stay. I must go, okay? We use the modal verb and another verb accompanying it, okay? So those are the modal verbs. Querer is a very important verb in Spanish, as it is in English with to want. So we will learn here the conjugation, okay? It is an irregular verb, so that's why we are dedicating one class for this verb, okay? We will learn the present tense or simple present, simple past, the present continuous, the future, and the imperative, okay? In Spanish we have different conjugation for the imperative in the affirmative and for the imperative in the negative, so we will see that. Before we begin, I want you to see the root of the verb querer is quer, okay? Quer. Always the last two letters of the verb is what we call the ending of the verb. This is what determines what group the verb belongs to. This verb actually belongs to the second group of verbs, the verbs that end with era, okay? So, regular verbs, when we conjugate them, the root remains unchanged, right, or untouched. This is an irregular verb, so we will see how the root changes in several situations, okay? That is what determines that the verb is irregular. So let's begin with the present tense. Yo quiero, I want. Tú quieres, you want. Él or ella quiere, he or she wants. Nosotros queremos, we want. Vosotros queréis, you plural want. Ustedes quieren, you plural want. And ellos quieren, they want. Okay? So here we can see how the verb is irregular also in the present tense conjugation. Look at this here. Okay? You can see that the root of the verb has changed. We have added a letter I here, okay, that does not appear in the root of the verb in infinitive. So this is an irregularity. Also here we can see it, here as well. Here for we or nosotros it is regular. Here for vosotros it's also regular. Here it becomes irregular again. And here as well, we can see how the root of the verb has been modified. Okay? Now let's jump into the simple past, or pasado simple, or as it is also called in Spanish, pretérito indefinido. Okay? Yo quise. Tú quisiste. Él o ella quiso. Nosotros quisimos. Vosotros quisisteis. Ustedes quisieron. And ellos quisieron. Remember, vosotros and ustedes mean the same thing, but they conjugate differently. Vosotros is the you plural used in Spain. Ustedes is the you plural used in Latin America, okay? So here we can see more irregularities in the simple past tense. Okay? Okay? You can see that for all the persons, for all the subject pronouns, the root of the verb has been modified. Okay, we can see this letter I appearing here that is not in the root of the verb in infinitive. Okay, so irregular verb. Okay, let's see the present continuous, or in Spanish we call it gerundio or participio presente. Right? Yo estoy queriendo. Yo estoy queriendo means I am wanting. Tú estás queriendo. Tú estás queriendo, or you are wanting. Él or ella está queriendo. He or she is wanting. Nosotros estamos queriendo. We are wanting. Vosotros estáis queriendo. You are wanting. Ustedes están queriendo. You are wanting. And ellos están queriendo. They are wanting. Okay? So here, as usual with the present continuous, there is no sign of irregularity. Okay? And now we will see future number 1. Okay, this is a typical future tense in Spanish, right? And you will find this conjugation just called future, that's all, right? Yo querré, tú querrás, él o ella querrá, nosotros querremos, vosotros querréis, ustedes querrán, and ellos querrán, right? You can see that here the root of the verb is unchanged, so this future tense is regular. There is no irregularity here, and so this is the root of the verb quer, and this is the typical ending for the future, okay? So that means that to one R we add another R, a second R. So we have this double R, right? Okay. So here we can see that this double R is pronounced R. Okay, it is the rough sound of the R. It's not the soft, the smooth sound R, like hablaré, right? Comeré. It is querré, R. Okay, so you have to try to pronounce that with it's a more dental R sound. Okay, so I know for English speakers it's a bit more difficult. It's R. Okay, it's quite Latin sound of R, okay? Querré, querrás, querrá. I'm exaggerating it a bit, okay? Querremos, querréis, querrán, and querrán. And later it comes a bit more natural. Querré, querrá, querremos, okay? So, future number 2. Okay, this is a future that is more similar to the English future tense. I will go, or I will want, or I am going to want, okay? We have an auxiliary verb, that is the one that changes, and the verb we are conjugating remains in infinitive, okay? Like in English, I will want, I will eat, right? So, yo voy a comer, yo voy a querer, I will want, or I am. So, in this future number 2 we say, yo voy a querer. Yo voy a querer means I will want or I am going to want. Tú vas a querer. You are going to want or you will want. Él or ella va a querer. Nosotros vamos a querer. Vosotros vais a querer. Ustedes van a querer. And ellos van a querer. Right? So here there is nothing irregular, nothing different, nothing strange. Right? And we will finish with imperativo, the imperative tense, or modo imperativo. And we will begin with the affirmative, imperativo afirmativo. Right? So, as usual in the imperative we never begin with I, because we omit the I, right? We do not give commands to ourselves. So, we begin with you. Quiere tú. It is an order or a command, right? Want. You want, right? We are giving an order. Quiere tú. Quiera él. Queramos nosotros. Quered vosotros. Quieran ustedes. And quieran ellos. Now in the negative, imperativo negativo. No quieras. Don't want. Okay? It's an order. Don't want. No quiera él. No queramos nosotros. No queráis vosotros. No quieran ustedes. and no quieran ellos, right? Of course, we may omit the subject pronoun, right? I'm just saying it for you to know that this conjugation is for this or that subject pronoun, okay? So let's now read each one in the affirmative and then in the negative, okay? And see how these two change. In the affirmative and in the negative, these two change. Okay? You'll see how it changes here and here. Okay? Look. Quiere tú and no quieras tú. You want or don't want. Right? See how it changes. Quiere and quieras. And here it is querer and here no queráis. Right? Because of these two persons, we have two different conjugations in the affirmative and the negative. So, quiere tú, no quieras tú, quiera él, no quiera él, queramos nosotros and no queramos nosotros, querer vosotros and no queráis vosotros. Quieran ustedes or no quieran ustedes. And the last one, quieran ellos or no quieran ellos. Okay? So this is the conjugation of the most used and necessary conjugation tenses in Spanish for the verb querer or to want, right? And in our next class I will show you how to conjugate the verb deber or tener que, which means to must or to have to, okay? So I will see you in the next lesson. Goodbye. Hi guys. So if you remember, in our last lessons we dedicated some classes to learning how to conjugate the Spanish modal verbs, okay? And we had left for this class the verb to must or deber. Deber. However, deber is a regular verb, okay? So we do not need to give it, although it is a very important verb in Spanish because, of course, all modal verbs are particularly important. However, since it is a regular verb, and I have already given you the tools for conjugating all regular verbs into all the different Spanish verbal tenses, right? So we won't see how to conjugate again the verb deber. However, there is another verb that is also used with the same meaning, right? The verb tener, and this one is irregular. So we will dedicate this class to seeing how to conjugate this verb. So what does tener mean? Tener means to have, right? Tener is exactly to have. And it also has this other use that the verb to have has in English, okay? So to have can mean I have something, right? I have a pen. And to have can also mean to must, right? For example, I can say I have to go, right? Means I must go. In Spanish, the verb tener has also this same function if we complement it with the word que, okay? So, tener means to have, and tener que means to have to, right? So, this verb, tener, when we complement it with the word que after it, it means it is a synonym of the verb deber. That means the verb to must, okay? So we can treat the verb tener as a regular, it's not a regular verb, it's an irregular verb, but like as a normal verb, right? And also as a modal verb, okay? So it's, if we use it as a modal verb, we have to add the word que after the verb, okay? And it is irregular, so we will give it special attention, okay? So our title today is Conjugación del verbo tener que. Conjugación del verbo tener que. Or conjugation of the verb tener que, or to have to, right? So, we will see present tense, or simple present, simple past, present continuous, two different future tenses, okay, for simple future, and the imperative in the affirmative and in the negative, right? So, let's begin with the present tense. Oh, first of all, let's identify the root of the verb, right? Er is the ending of the verb. Er. It's a verb of the second group. And ten is the root of the verb, right? So, whenever the root of the verb changes, that means it is an irregularity. If the root of the verb remains untouched or the same, it means that it conjugates regularly, okay? Let's begin with the present tense. Presente. Yo tengo. I have. Or yo tengo que. I have to. Tú tienes. You have. Or tú tienes que. You have to. Él or ella tiene, or él o ella tiene que. He or she has, or he, she has to. Nosotros tenemos, or nosotros tenemos que. We have, or we have to. Vosotros tenéis. You have. Vosotros tenéis que. You have to. Ustedes tienen. You have. Ustedes tienen que. You have to. And ellos tienen. They have. Ellos tienen que. They have to. For example, they have to go. Ellos tienen que ir. Right? So remember, vosotros and ustedes are synonyms. They mean you plural. But vosotros is used in Spain, ustedes is used in Latin America, right? And the conjugation is different for both of them. Ustedes conjugates the same as ellos, as they, right? Let's go to the pasado simple, or simple past. In Spanish, we also call the simple past pretérito indefinido. Yo tuve, or yo tuve que. I had, or I had to. Tú tuviste. Él, ella tuvo. Nosotros tuvimos. Vosotros tuvisteis. Ustedes tuvieron. And ellos tuvieron. Ellos tuvieron. They had. Or ellos tuvieron que. They had to. Right? Now let's identify where the verb became irregular. Okay? You can see the root of the verb is ten. So where the root has changed, it has become irregular. Okay? Here, it's not so noticeable, but it's irregular because it added the G. Okay? And if you remember, when I taught you how to conjugate the verbs, for the present tense, for the I or yo, it just needs to add an O to the root of the verb, right? That's for the regular verbs. So here, the root of the verb has added a G, right? If this were regular, this would conjugate as teno, but we add a G, tengo. Okay, that's why here it is irregular. Here it's also irregular, and it's more visible because the root of the verb changed from ten to tien, right? Here as well. Here it's regular, and nosotros tenemos, right? Here it is regular. You can see how this remained unchanged, the same, okay? Here it's also regular. Here it became irregular again and irregular again. Okay? Now in the past, the root of the verb changes even more. From ten, it changed to tuv, right? Again, tuv. So you can see how much the root of the verb tener has changed for the simple past, okay? Now let's see the present continuous, right? I am having to, or I am having, right? Yo estoy teniendo, or yo estoy teniendo que. I am having, or I am having to. Tú estás teniendo. Él o ella está teniendo. Nosotros estamos teniendo. Vosotros estáis teniendo. Ustedes están teniendo. And ellos están teniendo. Right? So here, as usual, for the present continuous, we have nothing awkward. It's always the same. This will remain the same, right? Right? This will always remain the same for all the verbs we want to conjugate in present continuous, and then we add this, the ending, to the verb we want to conjugate, okay? In this case, the verb tener, teniendo, okay? Let's see the future. This is the simple future, the typical future tense in Spanish, okay? So for our simple future in Spanish, we will start with yo, with I. Yo tendré. Yo tendré, I will have. Or yo tendré que, I will have to. For example, I will have to work. Yo tendré que trabajar, which means to work. Okay? Tú tendrás. You will have. Él or ella tendrá. He or she will have. Nosotros tendremos. We will have. Vosotros tendréis. Ustedes tendrán. And ellos tendrán. They will have. Or ellos tendrán que. They will have to. Okay? So here, where is the irregularity? The irregularity is in the letter D. That shouldn't go there if this were a regular verb, okay? So this letter D is irregular for the future tense, right? Because it does not belong to the root of the verb, and it does not belong either to the typical regular ending of a verb in the future tense conjugation, okay? So you can see that this verb is also irregular in the future. But now we will see this future number 2, which is the future that I insist is much more simple, right? Mainly for English speakers, because you don't have to memorize the conjugation for this verb, okay? We just take the auxiliary verb, right? And then we leave the verb in infinitive, okay? Yo voy a tener. I am going to have. Or yo voy a tener que. I am going to have to, right? Tú vas a tener. Él o ella va a tener. Nosotros vamos a tener. Vosotros vais a tener. Ustedes van a tener. And ellos van a tener. They are going they are going to have, or ellos van a tener que, they are going to have to, right? For example, they are going to have to eat. Ellos van a tener que comer, right? Which means to eat. Now we will finish with the imperative tense. Modo imperativo. Modo imperativo. In the affirmative and in the negative. You can see how this one and this one, these two subject pronouns, they change, the conjugation changes whether it is in the affirmative or in the negative, right? Always talking about the imperative. So let's begin. Remember that we begin with the you, not with I, right? There is no I in the imperative. So, ten, tú. Ten, tú. You have, right? But it's a command, an order, right? You have, or you, in English it would be you take, right? But imagine that you are giving an order or a command using the verb to have, right? Ten, tú, or ten que tú, right? Tenga él. Tengamos nosotros. Tened vosotros. Tengan ustedes, and tengan ellos. Now see how in the imperative, how in the negative, how the conjugation changes for tú and for vosotros, right? Look, no tengas que, or no tengas tú. So from ten changed to tengas in the negative. No tengas, or no tengas que. No tenga él. No tengamos nosotros. No tengáis vosotros. Again, vosotros changed from tener to tengáis in the negative, right? No tengáis. Don't have, or don't have to. No tengáis que. No tengan ustedes, and no tengan ellos, right? So let's repeat this again, but for every person we'll read the affirmative and the negative, right? Alternatively. Ten tú, and no tengas tú. Tenga él, no tenga él. Tengamos nosotros, no tengamos nosotros. Tened vosotros, and no tengáis vosotros. Tengan ustedes, no tengan ellos, and tengan ustedes, no tengan ustedes, and tengan ellos, no tengan ellos, right? Ustedes and ellos always conjugate the same, remember that. And here you can see that this verb is also irregular in the imperative, right? Because this G that you see here does not belong to the root of the verb and does not belong to the typical regular ending of the imperative tense, okay? So you can see that the verb tener is irregular in the present, in the past, in the future, and in the imperative, right? And these are just in the tenses we have seen today, right? So it's a quite irregular verb. So remember that tener means to have, and tener que means to have to or to must, right? So it can also be used as a modal verb, right? As a synonym and a substitute of the verb deber, right? I show you deber here. Deber, to must, which is a modal verb, but we don't need to conjugate it here because it is regular verb, okay? So you already have the tools to conjugate this verb. So remember, if you have any questions, you can send them to me and I'll be glad to answer any questions you have, and thank you for watching this lesson. Hi guys! In this class we will learn some sentences, some examples using the verb tener, right? Tener means to have. And tener que, when we put it together with this word que, means to have to. If you remember our previous lessons, we were seeing modal verbs in Spanish, okay? And one of the modal verbs we saw was the verb deber. Deber is the verb to must, right? To must. And same as in English, we have a synonym for saying to must, which is to have to. In Spanish, the synonym for deber is tener que, okay? So, our title today will be Uso del verbo tener que. Uso del verbo tener que. Or usage or use of the verb to have or to have to, right? The verb just alone, tener, means to have, like I have a pen, okay? And if we complement it with the word que, tener que means to have to, right? To have to do something or to have to whatever, okay? So we will see some sentences where I expect that you will be catching little by little, by intuition, right? Absorbing the structure, the typical structure of Spanish sentences, okay? And that will help you to speak, to build sentences, to write, etc., okay? So let's begin. We will see some examples using the verb tener and the verb tener que. Tengo hambre. Tengo hambre means I am hungry, or I feel hungry, right? But literally, this means I have hunger. I have hunger, right? Look at the example below. Tengo frío. Tengo frío. I have cold. But it means I feel cold or I am cold, right? In Spanish, and listen well, in Spanish, sensations, we refer to them as having the sensation, okay? So, when we speak of hunger, thirst, cold, warmth, hotness, or whatever sensation it is, right? In Spanish, we don't say that we are the sensation or that we feel the sensation. We say we have the sensation, okay? So, I have hunger, right? Tengo hambre, tengo frío. And there is a way for saying in Spanish, I feel hungry. We can say, me siento hambriento, okay? It's correct, it exists. Me siento hambriento literally means I feel hungry. However, it's not frequently used actually. The normal and frequent way of speaking is tengo hambre, right? Whatever sensation it is, we have the sensation, right? Juan tiene un perro. Juan tiene un perro means Juan has a dog. Juan has a dog. Ayer tuve un dolor de cabeza. Ayer tuve un dolor de cabeza means yesterday I had a headache, okay? So we can omit the un, okay? We can say ayer tuve un dolor de cabeza or simply ayer tuve dolor de cabeza, okay? Same as in English. Yesterday I had a headache or yesterday I had headache. No, actually in English we would say yesterday I had a headache, right? So, headache in English is one single word, okay? Headache. In Spanish, for headache we need 3 words. Dolor de cabeza, which literally means pain of head, right? Pain, dolor means pain. De means of. Cabeza means head, okay? So, dolor de cabeza means headache. Dolor de barriga or dolor de panza means tummy ache, or if you want to say stomach ache, dolor de estómago, okay? Okay. Tengo 3
días para ir. Tengo 3 días para ir. This means I have 3 days to go. I have 3 days to go. Tengo 3 días para ir. So where is the word I, the subject pronoun I? Where is it? In Spanish, we are omitting the subject pronoun, okay? And you know that already. Tengo hambre, okay? Where is yo? We can say yo tengo hambre. We can say yo tengo frío, but we usually do not, right? Because the verb, when it is conjugated, already hints us regarding the subject, okay? So I look at, or I listen to tengo, and the ending, go, already tells me it's present tense, and it ends in O. I know it is first person, I, okay? Tuve, here, tuve, I know it is the verb tener. I know it is in the past because tuve is, I know it's the irregular conjugation of the verb tener in the past, and the ending tells me also that it is I, okay? So you can see that in Spanish it is correct, and whenever we can, we usually do omit the subject pronoun, right? Tengo sed. Tengo sed. Again, what we saw before. I have thirst. I have thirst, or I feel thirsty, right? Or I am thirsty. In Spanish we say I have thirst. Tengo sed, okay? Tengo que comer. Tengo que comer. I have to eat. So here we are already seeing tener que. I have to, right? Synonym of the verb to must, or deber in Spanish, okay? So, tengo que comer means I have to eat. Él tiene que ir a estudiar. Él tiene que ir a estudiar. He has to go to study. He has to go to study. Él tiene que ir a estudiar. Tiene que, has to, okay? Tengo que pensar. Tengo que pensar, again, to have to, okay? Tengo que, we are complementing the verb with the word que, it means I have to. Tengo que pensar means I have to think. I have to think. Tienes que portarte bien. Tienes que portarte bien means tienes, you can see the conjugation, especially the ending with es. We know that the person or the subject is you in the singular, okay? So, and this is in the present. You have to behave well. You have to behave, or you have to behave well, okay? Tienes que portarte bien. And take a look. Portarte. The ending te shows us, te comes from yourself, okay? This shows us this is another reflexive verb, okay? Verbo reflexivo. This literally means behave yourself, okay? You have to behave yourself well, okay? Tuve un sueño, or can be tuve una pesadilla. I had a dream, or I had a nightmare, right? Sueño ends with an O. It is masculine noun. So the article should be un, masculine indeterminate article, okay? However, if we want to say tuve una pesadilla, I had a nightmare, pesadilla, nightmare, ends with a. It is a feminine noun. So the Spanish undetermined article for pesadilla should be una with an a, una, because it's feminine, okay? So, tuve un sueño means I had a dream. Tuve una pesadilla means I had a nightmare. Okay? And our last example is tengo que saber qué pasó. Tengo que saber qué pasó. I have to know what happened. I have to know what happened. Tengo means I have. Que, in this case, means to. I have to. Saber means is the verb to know, right? So I have to know. Que means what. See, look at, these are different words. Que and que. These are different words. Where do we see the difference? This que has a tilde here on top of the letter E. This que with a tilde means what. Okay? What. So, I have to know what happened. Que pasó. Okay? Pasó is the simple past of the verb pasar, or to happen. Okay? Pasar is to pass. Okay? Or to happen. Can have two meanings. Right? And here we have other two synonyms for happened, for pasó. We can say pasó or ocurrió from the verb ocurrir, or we can say sucedió, sucedió from the verb suceder, right? So these three verbs or words mean the same thing, happened. Tengo que saber qué pasó, or tengo que saber qué ocurrió, or tengo que saber qué sucedió. They all mean I have to know what happened. Okay? So, these are some examples I wanted to show you using the verb tener or tener que, which I hope now you can see, you can know how it works, how it is used, and you will understand the meaning well. And remember that tener just alone means to have. Tener que is a synonym of deber, which means to must or should, right? So, every time we have the verb tener and the word que, like here, 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 all these that are underlined, okay? Tengo que. All these that are underlined, we can replace the verb tener, que, with the verb deber. The verb deber. Deber. Of course, we need to conjugate the verb deber into the proper tense with a proper subject, okay? So here we can say tengo que comer, or we can say debo comer. Means the same thing. Él tiene que ir a estudiar, or we can say él debe ir a estudiar. Here we can say tengo que pensar, I have to think, or we can also say debo pensar, I must think, or I should think, or I have to think, okay? Tienes que portarte bien, you have to behave well. Tienes que portarte bien, or we can say debes portarte bien, right? Oh, I forgot to underline this here. I underlined this one by mistake, okay? Tienes que portarte bien, or debes portarte bien. The last one, tengo que saber qué pasó. Tengo que saber qué pasó. We replace tengo que with the verb deber, conjugated, of course, right? And we will say, debo saber qué pasó. I must know what happened, or I have to know what happened, or I should know what happened, okay? Debo saber qué pasó. So, deber is a synonym, means the same thing as tener que, Okay? So you can use any of these two verbs to say the same thing. So this is the end of the lesson. Remember, you can send any questions you have or suggestions through the YouTube channel or through my blog. And okay, thanks for watching. Hi there! So today we will continue with our review of the Spanish alphabet, okay? We were seeing one letter at a time, so we had the chance to start learning new vocabulary, okay? And together with it, also some new grammar, because we were learning new verbs as well, okay? And conjugations. So today we will see the letter C, or la letra C. La letra C. Letter C, same as in English, has two possible sounds or pronunciations. It can be S or K, right? But no further explanation of this because it's the same as in English, okay? So let's begin. Nombres propios masculinos. Nombres propios masculinos. These are male or masculine given names. Nombres is names, propios would be given, masculinos masculine, okay? So remember that in Spanish first goes the noun and then goes the adjective, okay? The adjective that relates more closely to the noun goes first, right? In this case, given names, nombres propios, and later comes the description masculine, right? So masculinos goes afterwards, okay? So we have Carlos, Carlos, Conrado, Conrado, and César, César. Take a look, see how Conrado, rrr, try to reproduce this sound, rrr, Conrado. The R, when it's at the end of the word or when it's between two vowels, it's the smooth R, okay? But when it is at the beginning of a sentence or doubled or between after a consonant as here, it's the rough sound of the R, Conrado, okay? Actually, this is because this, if we divide it in syllables, this is how we divide the word Conrado in syllables. And since the R is at the beginning of a syllable, the same rule applies when the R goes at the beginning of a word, okay? Conrado. Okay. Now, nombres propios femeninos. Nombres propios femeninos. These are the feminine given names. We have Carla, Carla. We have Claudia, Claudia, and Carolina, Carolina. Okay? You can see how here, for Carolina, the R is not the rough R, it's R. It's a smoother R. Carolina. Okay? So try to differentiate those two different sounds of the R in Spanish. Now let's see animals. Animales que comienzan con la letra C, or animals that begin with the letter C. We have cocodrilo, cocodrilo. Okay? Cocodrilo is crocodile. Now see how interesting. Here the R, it's not the rough R, it's R, the smoother R. Cocodrilo. It's not cocodrilo, it's cocodrilo. Why? Let's again divide in syllables. Separate in syllables. Dri-lo. Okay? You can see here the R is in the middle of a syllable. It's not at the beginning of a syllable, okay? That's why it's a smooth R, okay? It doesn't begin, it neither begins the word nor the syllable. Cocodrilo. Same thing with with this word, cuervo. Cuervo means crow, okay, the bird, the black bird, the crow. Cuervo, cuervo. Also, this R is a smooth R. Let's divide this in syllables. Cuervo, cuervo. Okay, so the R is neither doubled nor at the beginning of a word or a syllable. So it is a smooth R. Cuervo. Okay, and our last example is ciervo. Same thing. Okay, ciervo means deer, a deer, the animal. Okay, ciervo, the R is also smooth. Ciervo. That's how we separate it in syllables. Okay. Now let's see some frutas y verduras. Frutas y verduras. These are fruits and vegetables, right? Actually, here I have just written 3 fruits that begin with the letter C. Like, for example, ciruela. Ciruela, okay? Ciruela is a plum. We have cereza, a cherry, okay? Cereza is a cherry. And we have coco. Coco is a coconut, right? So we have ciruela, cereza, coco. These 3 fruits that begin with the letter C. Now let's see some adjectives or adjetivos. Adjetivos. We have cálido. Cálido means warm. It's not the same thing as caliente. Caliente means hot, right? So, warm and hot. Cálido, caliente, right? And contento. Contento means glad. Can also be happy, but it's more related to glad, right? Happy would probably be feliz, right? Feliz would be happy. Contento would be glad, okay? Now, adverbs. In Spanish we write this adverbios. Adverbios, right? We have claramente, clearly, right? Same as clearly is formed by the word clear, by the adjective clear and the ending li, right? That identifies the adverbs in English. In Spanish, claramente is formed by the adjective clara, which means clear, and the ending mente. As in English we have the ending li, clearly, faithfully, okay? So I don't write anymore, but here we can choose most of the adjectives that begin with letter C and add the ending mente, okay? Same as in English we would add the ending li, right? Ly. Now let's see some false friends or false cognates that begin with the letter C, right? These are the false cognates between English and Spanish. Words that are very similar between both languages but have different meanings, okay? So we usually confuse them. Let's see, false friends, I have chosen these 3. Carpeta, the word carpeta. Carpeta. It does not mean carpet, it means folder, okay? As in Windows, when we open a folder or we double click on a folder, that is a carpeta, okay? The Spanish word for carpet is tapete or alfombra, right? Second false friend, contestar. Contestar, right? Contestar means to answer. It is a verb. Contestar. In Spanish you can always recognize the Spanish verbs because they end in AR or in ER, or in IR, right? Because we have three different classifications of Spanish verbs. So you can see that this is a Spanish verb of the first classification, okay, of the first group. So contestar means to answer. And how do we say contest? So how do we say contest in Spanish, right? Because contestar means to answer. So contest is contienda or competencia, right? Contienda or competencia. That's a Spanish word or words for contest, right? Our last false friend will be constipación. Constipación, 3 syllables. Constipación does not mean constipation. Constipación means a cold, right? Cold in the sense of sickness, not the adjective cold. When you have a cold and you're sneezing, right? That is constipación. The Spanish word for what in English we know as a constipation would be estreñimiento. Estreñimiento. That is a constipation. And una constipación is a cold. Okay, now let's see 3 verbos regulares. 3 Spanish regular verbs, right? We have the verb cantar, that means to sing, cantar. It is a verb, a regular verb of the first group, because it ends in ar, right? We have comer, comer, which is to eat. It is a regular verb of the second group. It ends in er. And we have caminar. Caminar means to walk, right? To walk. Caminar is a regular verb of the first group. It ends in ar, as like the first one, okay? And let's finish today with 3 irregular verbs, okay? That I will show you how to conjugate later. Verbos irregulares que comienzan con la letra C, okay? We can say que comienzan or que empiezan, right? Comenzar or empezar both mean to start, right? It's like saying to start or to begin. Both verbs are synonyms, right? So, we have the verb cerrar. Cerrar. See how here we have double R. Double R. That's why, although the R is in the middle of the word and in between 2 vowels, right? We pronounce it R, the rough R, because it is doubled, right? Cerrar. Cerrar, or to close, or to shut, right? The verb caer. Caer. Caer means to fall. The pen fell. La lapicera se cayó, right? That would be the simple past of the verb caer. And the verb contar. Contar. Contar is to count, okay? When we count 1, 2, 3, 4, or when we are counting money, right? Or also, contar can be to tell a story, right? Or to tell something. Yes? So let's also write down this meaning. Contar can also be to tell. To tell. So we use this verb a lot with these 2 meanings. To count and to tell. I'm telling something to somebody. Le estoy contando algo a alguien. Okay? So we have cerrar, to close or to shut, caer, to fall, and contar means to count or to tell, right? These are the 3 irregular verbs we will see today that begin with letter C. And later I will show you how to conjugate these verbs, and we will also do some examples using some sentences, right? Some Spanish sentences. So thanks for watching, and if you have any questions or doubts, you can send them to me. I'll be glad to
to reply them, and I'll see you in the next class. Goodbye.